Good morning. This morning I'll be reading from Luke chapter 15, verses 11 through 32. Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said unto his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son had got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods the pigs were eating, but no one would give him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he went up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to his father, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But after the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For the son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field, and when he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. 'Your brother has come,' he replied, 'and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has him back safe and sound.' The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he asked his father, 'Look, after all these years, I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you killed a fatted calf for him.' 'My son,' the father said, 'you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.'"
Happy Father's Day to all of our fathers out there. Glad that you're here today. Whether you're a spiritual father to others or a physical father, we are greatly appreciative for you and all that you do. There are 2 things that were in the foyer today. One was a box of tomatoes, and then there were rocks that were passed out to everybody. Those are not to be thrown at me this morning, okay, number 1. Don't eat the rocks, but you can eat the tomatoes. Okay, so I think we got all the qualifiers out of the way before we get started this morning. Hold on to that rock. We're going to be coming back to that here this morning. I want you to picture something this morning, not a thing in the room, a thing that you've been carrying. It's not a bag, it's not a backpack. It's something even heavier than that and quite a bit older. Most of us have one. It's a thing we did, or a thing that we said, a version of ourselves we hope to God that nobody in this room ever finds out about. And here's what's so cruel about it. You've already dealt with it. You've confessed it probably 100 times, maybe 1,000 times. If I stopped right now and asked you, do you believe that God's forgiven you of that? You'd probably say yes, you really would. You'd believe He has. And yet you still wake up in the middle of the night and it's sitting right there on your chest. You pick it back up before your feet even hit the floor. In fact, you've carried it for so long that you've forgotten it was ever optional to put it down. Some of you carried it so long it doesn't even feel like it's a weight anymore. It just feels like, well, you. It's the asterisk that you quietly put on every good thing that ever happens to you. Yeah, but if they knew. It's the reason you don't pray out loud, the reason you sit towards the back, the reason you flinch a little when the sermon starts getting a little too close to home. You built an entire life around managing that weight that God's not even holding anymore. And here's the strangest part about it. The people you hurt, many of them forgave you years ago. God says He forgave you the day that you asked Him, and there's exactly one person left in this entire building still trying the case against you. You shave his face in the morning. You fix her hair in the mirror. The prosecutor never dropped it because the prosecutor is you. But I have to tell you about a second voice. Because some of you aren't only fighting yourself, there are people in your life who you don't want, who do not want you to forget it. People who like the old leverage, who bring it up at every holiday gathering, who keep your worst moment tucked in their back pocket and slide it across the table the second they need to get the upper hand in a situation. And it's awfully hard to believe that God remembers your sin no more when there are people in your life determined to make sure that you never will. Hold on to that. We're coming back to those people because there's a man in our story this morning who is exactly like them. And he's standing out right outside of a party. Now, some of you were here 2 weeks ago and you stood in the courtyard with a man named Peter warming his hands over a charcoal fire, swearing up and down he never knew Jesus. And we watched Jesus rebuild him on that beach. But I've been thinking about the nights in between, the night he warmed himself by the fire and denied Jesus, and the morning that he had breakfast with Jesus and he redeemed him. What happened between those two moments? Between the rooster crowing and the empty tomb? What do you suppose Peter did during those days? He carried that memory, didn't he? He probably picked it up every single morning. The denial itself was over in about a minute, but the weight of it, he would have carried that to his grave if Jesus had let him. And if you've ever carried something like that, then you already know the one thing you would give anything to be able to do with it. You wish to God that you could just forget it. People even tell you, you just got to forget about it and move on. As if you could. As if it's just some muscle that you can flex and it'll be taken care of. You just can't do it. You've tried. Hold on to that word with me, forget. We're going to come back to it before we're done, and when we do, I promise you that it's going to change everything, but not just yet, because here's the question I'm not going to answer just yet. Why is it that the one person God has completely and totally forgiven is the one person I cannot forgive? And why do I turn right around and keep that same kind of score on everybody else? Why is it that I can't set down anybody's debt, not mine and not theirs? Here's my promise to you this morning. If you'll stay with me for the next half hour, you're going to get the chance to set it down, maybe for the first time in years. The very thing, the very weight that you walked in here carrying. Not because you finally worked hard enough to deserve it. Not because you white-knuckled your way so that to the point where the feeling just went away, but because you were about to find out that it was settled a long, long time ago, and nobody ever told you that you were allowed to stop carrying it. You're not going to earn a verdict this morning. You're going to catch up to the one that was handed down before you ever walked into the building. And to get there, I want to take you to the most famous homecoming Jesus ever told, and I want you to meet two brothers. In Luke chapter 15, Jesus tells about a man with two sons. The younger one walks up to his father and with great audacity says, in effect, I wish you were dead. Just give me all your inheritance. Have you ever thought about that? Like, why would he demand his inheritance? You're essentially saying, well, I wish you were dead, because if you were dead, I could have all of your belongings, all of your estate, everything that you've worked for. So he essentially walks in and says to his dad, hey, Dad, I wish you were dead. Give me my half of what I deserve when you die. That's what he's asking for. Pretend you've already died and give me your money. And stunningly in this story, right, the father does. And the boy cashes out. And when he cashes out, he runs off to a distant country. And the text says, listen to this in verse 13, he squandered his estate, that was really his father's given to him, with loose living. Burns through every single dollar. And when the money's gone, a famine hits in the land, the faraway land that he's visiting. And listen to this. Think about this for a second. This Jewish boy ends up in the one place lower than a Jewish boy could ever imagine falling. I want you to think about this. He's in the pig pen. Think about that. Jew, pig. He's so hungry, the scripture says, that he eyed the pods that the pigs were eating and wished he were eating what the pigs were eating. And then comes one of the most important sentences. In verse 17, it says, he came to his senses. And he decides it's time to go home. But watch what he does along the way. The text says that it was a faraway land. And back then, they didn't have air travel. They didn't have fast cars. The journey back was probably days or weeks or months to get home. And that from that entire moment of great awakening in verse 17 to the time that he gets home, he's rehearsing in his head what's about to happen when he walks through that door. Luke even records it for us. In verses 18 and 19, notice what Luke says. He's talking to himself. He says, I will get up and I will go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and in your sight, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me one of your hired men. Read that last line again. Make me one of your hired men. He's not planning a homecoming reunion, coming home as a long-lost son. He already sentenced himself to a demotion. Somewhere on that road, in that dirt, he held court against himself, and he heard the evidence, and he found himself guilty. And he handed down the sentence. Not son, hired hand. And now he's walking home, carrying that verdict like a stone in his pocket. Now look what happens in verse 20. So he got up and he came to his father. But while he was still a long ways off, his father saw him and felt compassion for him. And he ran and he embraced him and he kissed him. Then the father saw him, which means the father had been what? He'd been watching for him. And he runs. Dignified Middle Eastern fathers did not run, but he runs anyway. And the son, just like he'd rehearsed over and over in his head on that long journey, begins verbatim, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Verse 21. But notice in this account that that's where his pre-planned speech ends. He didn't make it to the end, did he? This whole speech that he'd been planning, he never gets to give it. He never gets to the part where he says, "Make me one of your hired men." He never gets to pronounce the judgment that he's made against himself, his own demotion, because the Father's already talking over him. He's already shouting to his servants in verse 22, "Quickly bring out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet, and bring the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate." Robe, that's the position of a son. A ring, that's the authority of a son. Sandals, hired men went barefoot. Sons wore shoes. The father would not even entertain the sentence that the boy had rehearsed the whole way home. Do you see it? The son came home to negotiate his punishment. The father came out to him to throw a party. The only thing standing between that boy and his father's arms was a speech the father didn't even want to hear. Some of you have been rehearsing your speech for years. I'm not worthy. I don't deserve to be called a son of God. Let me serve in the back where nobody can see me. And God keeps trying to get a robe on you, while you keep trying to finish your sentence. But Jesus doesn't end the story at that party, does he? Because there's a second son. And he is the reason I told you at the very beginning to remember the people who don't want you to forget. In verse 25, now his older son was in the field, the faithful one, the one who had never left, doing his job like he did every single day consistently. And he comes back and he hears music. And he sees dancing. And he finds out his brother is home. And get this, he's furious. The text tells us in verse 28, he became angry and was not willing to go into the house. That's how mad he was. So the father, the same father who ran down the road for the younger boy, now comes out a second time. And he starts pleading with the older one to come inside. And listen to what the older brother does, because it's surgical and precise. He stands outside his own father's party and he reads his brother's rap sheet out loud. Did you notice that? The father never mentioned any of this. Verse 30, but when this son of yours came, who has devoured your wealth with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him. Verse 30. Catch two things in that one sentence. First, this son of yours, married couples with children. When your child misbehaves and you go to tell the other parent about what happened, almost always what do you say? You know what your son did? Right? It's never like, you know what my son did? No, it's always, you know what your son did? This older brother does the exact same thing. This son of yours. And he's itemizing it. He's itemizing the sins that the father never even mentions anywhere in the text. Did you notice it? Nowhere. Nowhere in the story does the father ever bring up the sins of the son. The father had already dropped it. The older brother went and dug it right back up, didn't he? And he laid it out on the table, and he wanted everybody to see it. He is the human version of the exact thing we keep doing to one another. Keeping detailed records of things that God has already cleared. And here's the warning for us, for this church, for our families, for our marriages. It's entirely possible to be the one who never left, who did everything right, who stayed faithful and served and showed up every single Sunday, and still be the person standing outside the Father's home with our arms crossed, holding a sin that God himself has already forgotten against someone else. Some of us would never dream of holding our own sins against ourselves because we're far too busy holding somebody else's sins against them. And the Father's words to that older boy are just about the gentlest rebuke in all of Scripture. Listen to this, verse 31. Son, you've been with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice. Listen so close to this. Look at it. If you've got your Bible, look at it. For this brother of yours was dead and has begun to live. He was lost and has been found. Notice the father gives the brother back to him. The son said, this son of yours. The father says, no, this brother of yours. He won't let the older boy erase the relationship the way the older boy is trying to. The father refuses to let either son keep the record open. Not the younger one drowning in his own guilt, and not the older one weaponizing it against his brother. So hold both brothers in front of you. One couldn't forgive himself, and one would not forgive his brother. Same sin, pointed in two different directions. And both of them are standing there clutching a file that the Father has already closed. And the whole rest of this morning is about getting both of those files out of your hands. But first I have to tell you how. How a father could possibly drop a debt that real. Because that's the part that changes everything. Do you remember the word I asked you to hold on to at the beginning? The word forget. You told me you couldn't do it, and guess what? You're right, you can't. But here's the single sentence that changes everything in this room. The thing you cannot do for yourself, God says He's already done it for you. The writer of Hebrews, quoting a promise of God made through the prophet Jeremiah 600 years before Jesus was born, says this about you. For I will be merciful to their iniquities, and listen very closely to this. I will remember their sins no more. In the original Jeremiah words, for I will forgive their iniquity, and their sin I will remember no more. I want you to sit in the scandal of that sentence with me for just a moment. This is the God who literally knows the number of hairs on your head. For me, they're getting fewer, but He knows every single one of them. This is the God that knows the number of hairs on your head, the God who sees every single sparrow that falls from the sky, the God who knew every thought you would ever think before you ever thought it. There's not one fact in this universe that is hidden from Him. Nothing. And that God, the all-knowing God, the God who cannot fail to know, looks at the sin you cannot stop replaying, and He says these words. What are you talking about? I don't remember it. Not I'll overlook it. Not, you know what? I'll let it slide this time. Not, you know what? I'm going to keep this in my back pocket so if you ever start to get out of line, like the parent used to do with the spoon in the purse, right? Just throw it. He says, what are you talking about? I don't even remember it. The writer keeps going. He says the entire old system, the whole machinery that keeps that record of sin is, and I'm quoting, it's becoming obsolete and it's growing old and it's ready to disappear. Hebrews chapter 8 and verse 13. Did you hear that? The ledger isn't locked up in a drawer somewhere with your name on it. The ledger's obsolete. I think sometimes we get this idea, people say one day we're going to go to heaven and we're going to give an answer to God for every action that we ever committed. That's really not true. There's a lot of actions that we've committed that God's already destroyed, and we don't have to give an account for them. He forgot them. And in case you think that's just one verse, let the witnesses line up. Isaiah says in Isaiah 43 and verse 25, even I am the one who wipes out your transgressions for my own sake, and I will not remember your sins. Micah says in Micah chapter 7, verse 19, he will cast all our sins into the depths of the sea. And a famous person once added, and he put a sign over it that says, no fishing. And then Hebrews says it a second time, just so we couldn't possibly miss it in verse 17, and their sins and their lawless deeds I will remember no more. So here's the question from the very beginning, but now you have the answer. Why can't you forgive the one person God has forgiven? Why do you keep the file open on the people around you? Because you've been holding a trial that God has already dismissed. Amen. You're the lone prosecutor, standing up in an empty courtroom, reading evidence out loud off a page to a judge who's not even there. The single most spiritual thing some of you will do this entire year is not going to be confessing some new sin. It's going to be finally forgiving the you that God already forgave. And finally closing the file on the person you've held it against. Because listen, if the all-knowing God forgot it, then who on earth do we think we are to keep bringing it back up? God forgot it. Now drop it. God forgot it. Now drop it. That's the whole thing. God forgot it. Now drop it. On your way in this morning, you were handed a rock, just a stone, and here's what it is. The rock is the weight. It's the thing you keep picking back up. It's your old sin that you just can't seem to forget. So, your challenge this week, it's simple, it's physical, and it's daily. Put that stone in your pocket and carry it with you. And it's going to be uncomfortable. It's supposed to be, because every single time your hand finds that rock at your desk, in your car, lying awake at 2 a.m, I want you to literally do one of two things. If you're reading your own file, the thing that you can't stop replaying, you take that rock out of your pocket, and I want you to literally, physically set it down. And I want you to say, God forgot it. Now drop it. And if you catch yourself rereading somebody else's file, the great injustice that they committed, that person you can't stop bringing up, the one whose worst moment you keep tucked in your back pocket for leverage, that same rock, I want you to take it out and set it down and say these words, God forgot it. Now drop it. You're training your hands to finally do what your heart keeps forgetting how to do. How to set things down. Because here's the truth that ties the whole morning together. You will never fully believe that God forgot your sin as long as you're determined to remember everybody else's. You will never fully believe that God forgot your sin as long as you're determined to remember everybody else's. You see, the grip works both ways. The same hand can't drop its own rock while it's wielding up a stone to throw at somebody else. So this week, both files, yours and theirs, every time you feel the urge to pick them up, take that rock, set it down, and say these words: God forgot it. Now drop it. You wouldn't be the first person to carry something you were sure was too heavy to ever set down. Manasseh, the most blood-soaked king Judah ever had, a man who sacrificed, listen, he sacrificed his own children. He was dragged off to Babylon in chains, and when he humbled himself, God brought him home and handed him back his throne. Or Jacob, who became a con man, who spent 20 years running from what he'd done to his own brother, and he limped away from one night of wrestling with God, carrying a brand new name. And then there's Matthew, the tax collector, the sellout, who got rich cheating his own neighbors for the empire occupying them. And Jesus walked straight up to his table and says, "Follow me," and turned a traitor into an apostle who wrote the very first book of the New Testament. Not one of them was too far gone, and neither are you. So, church, do you hear what every one of those names has in common? None of them, if you had asked them, could believe at first that they were welcome at Jesus' table. Every single one of them had already handed themselves a verdict. Too far gone. Too guilty. Not the kind of person that can sit at God's table. And every single time, God had already overturned it before they ever finished arguing their case. And that's the whole problem in this room this morning. The debt was settled a long time ago. The case was dismissed before you ever even walked in the door. There's no one left in the courtroom, and the judge went home. The file is gone, and you're the only one still holding it. So this morning, there are two of you that I'm talking to. One of you has been carrying your own rock. You've prayed for forgiveness 1,000 times. And you've believed everything except the part where it actually applies to you. The verdict is in. The record is gone. He remembers it no more. God forgot it. Now drop it. And one of you came in here this morning holding the rock for a different reason. Not as a weight that you've been carrying, but as a stone that you've been ready to throw. There's a person in your life, maybe in this room, that God has completely forgiven, but you haven't. And you've been standing outside the party with your arms crossed, holding their worst moment in their life in your hand, refusing to go in. And the music is playing, and the dancing is happening, and you're on the outside because God dropped it, or God forgot it, and you refuse to drop it. So in just a moment, we're going to stand and sing. And I want you to forget there's anybody else in this room except for you and the God of the Bible, the Father in our story this morning. If you've been carrying your own rock and you're ready to stop carrying what God has already set down, I want you to bring it to the front and lay it down. You don't have to say a word to a single person about what it is. Nobody needs to know. You and God know. You don't owe anybody an explanation. One of our elders will be standing right here on the front row and will simply stand and pray beside you while you whisper, "I need help letting go of what God forgot." Our elders would count that an honor. But the act is yours. It's your choice. God forgot it. Will you drop it? And if you've been holding that rock as a stone, ready to throw it at somebody God has already forgiven, then today is the day for you to come and to say it out loud. To stop being the older brother standing outside in the dark and to come in and declare it. I will not hold this stone any longer. I will not stand outside the party one more day. I've been wrong. I forgive my brother, and I'm ready to come inside and join the celebration. Either way, today's the day to set the rock down. Either way, you can walk out of here with empty hands. Because it was never yours to keep carrying, and it was never yours to throw. Because God forgot it. Now drop it while we stand and sing.